All right, what's up, my scurvy pirates? I just wanted to put together this quick little tutorial just to kind of demo some of the techniques I've been using to do some of this cleanup. This is my first tutorial, so bear with me. I'm just kind of gonna clunk my way through it and see how it goes. I don't actually have permission to use this plate, but I'm gonna keep this as a private link just as a sort of test. But I figured you guys can maybe learn something, and if I'm doing something that I could learn from, that'd be great too. So start here with this plate. You can see what I had to do here is we've got this close-up of this hand, and I've got to remove this tattoo. Let me go ahead and put a LUT on this so that we can see it better. It's RE log C footage, and if we want to be in a linear workspace, we can pipe it into a Cineon log. Make sure that we're in floating 16 floating points so we don't clip any of our values later down the line. And if we turn our LUT on, it's a little bit easier to see. So we can see we've got this crazy tattoo that we got to remove. It's moving all over the place. It's out of focus. There's a change in perspective. And it looks like, oh man, that's going to be a crazy cleanup job. But depending on how you approach it, it may not actually be so bad. And let me show you a technique that I use quite often for things like this. So I'm going to use Mocha here in this demo. And if you don't have Mocha, that's okay. You can still sort of use the techniques and everything like that. But I do recommend, if you're doing this kind of cleanup work, Mocha is more than worth it and more than will pay for itself. So let's get started. So I'm going to start really quick and pipe instead. I know we just did this LUT, but into a color correct, because when I send something into Mocha, it's not going to use Fusion's built-in viewer LUTs. So I want to actually just kind of brute force a color correction really quick, just so that Mocha's got something to look at that looks nice. Now if I create a Mocha node, got Mocha Pro here. Okay, let's launch the Mocha UI. Cache these frames. So if you've never used Mocha before, it's pretty simple. This isn't going to be really a Mocha tutorial, but this is kind of how I use it. So we'll create a spline just sort of around the area we're trying to track. It's a planar tracker, so you want to kind of keep just on it the same plane. It's not very helpful to kind of be over here or anything like that, but in this case I'm going to actually keep a little bit of this crease just because it might help me with the tracking a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my surface on as well, just so that I can see if we've got a good track or not. So let's go ahead and track. I'm going to track these few frames forward. Jump back and let's track backwards now. Let's just see what we got. So it's working pretty good. We can click this if we want to stabilize around our view. Kind of helps. We can see we had a little jump there. Other than that, it's pretty good. So let's see what's up with this jump. Sometimes with Mocha, if you just kind of give it a little something more to grab onto and just retract this part, looks like we fixed it. So now we can see that we've got, no, that's going crazy. Now we can see we've got this tracked pretty well. The perspective is in there. We can tell from this, the reason I turn the surface on is it's got this little crosshair in the center, which sometimes helps you to determine if your track is on point. You can move this over, move this down, and I can say put this little crosshair right on this point. And then when I scroll this, I can tell, am I drifting? Am I staying locked on? It looks pretty good for the fact that we're on a finger. It's a curved surface. So next, we want to actually expand our surface area to cover the entire area that we're going to be doing our work, because these four corners is the corner pin that's going to come into Fusion. So we want to make sure that this covers the entire area, because later, if for instance you're cutting something off, as you can see could happen here, it becomes a lot more difficult later down the line to try to deal with that and expand this area and work with your cleanup later if this is too small, because this is going to be pretty much your work area. I've had several times where I've had to almost redo a shot because I just didn't realize that I was kind of too small with my surface area. So in this case though, this is going to be fine. I'm actually going to go ahead and let's just put the entire hand in there, just in case. Expand that a little bit. Okay, so we go to export tracking data. I've got it set already to Blackmagic Fusion comp. We'll say copy to clipboard, and you just Apple Q to close out. Now here we are back in Fusion, and I paste, and now I get a tracker, and I get this empty loader. It always does this, and you don't need it. You can just delete it. And now if we pipe our plate into the tracker and look at it, you can see that we've got corner pins in the spots where our surface was, which is fine, and the plate underneath looks the same. So an interesting thing about the tracker, the way that Fusion's got it set up, is you've got a background and a foreground input. And what we're wanting to do, if you go up to operation here and you go to, we want to use this right here, perspective positioning. But you can see that all of these options look like they're not doing anything. They look the same. But that's because we've got background only, foreground only. We've got these different options that depend on what our input is. So if we actually input the exact same thing into here, and I'm just gonna make a little knot here, so keep things tidy. Now if I click foreground only, check this out. Now we're getting this stabilized pre-comp that's centered around our track. And as you can see right here, this is an example of, you see how I'm being cut off right here? So in this case, this is fine, but say for instance, if I was doing something to this whole hand, this wouldn't be a good idea. This would be something that I would see right now and I would notice, and I would right away want to go back into Mocha and expand that out and copy paste it back in and get here, because if I try to do a bunch of work now and then I discover this later, that's going to be a lot more work to try to fix that. So anyway, now we've got our stabilized pre-comp, which is cool. Now this is something that I tend to do. You don't have to do this, but you can see that our hand in here is a little bit distorted, and it just has to do with the aspect ratio of this surface that we created. So I tend to like to distort these things back into some sort of realistic perspective, because it just makes it easier to do any kind of work, paint work, roto work, anything like that. So what's cool is what I can do here is I can create a transform, pipe that in, and then right away if I copy and then paste an instance, which is Apple Shift V, you can see now I get an instance transform. And if I, on the instance transform, right click invert transform and de-instance it, and then toggle this and pipe this over, look at our result. You can see nothing's changed. But if I look at my first transform, untoggle the aspect and I squeeze it in a little bit so that it looks a little more normal, if I look at this result, you can see it's squeezed back. It's the exact same result from our tracker, which is going to be important later. So I'll actually just show you that right now. So just to complete our little cleanup rig, we've got this stabilized pre-comp that we're going to do our work, but somehow we have to get this back looking like this on the hand. So the way that we can do that is we take the tracker, just take this whole thing with the knot and everything, copy, paste it, pipe this back in, look at our result, and now what it's doing is it's perspective positioning it twice, but if we go to operation and change it to corner positioning, it puts it back, which is cool. And then now if you see, if I just create a merge, pipe this into the background, pipe this into the foreground, and look at the result. We're back where we were. So what's cool about this is now, let me move this stuff up. Now we can do our work in here. Now we're all set up. So the way that I would approach this is I see that I've got a clean finger here that's almost the same kind of size, position, everything like that. So what I'm thinking is I might be able to take a patch here and put it over top of here and distort it in any way that I need to make it work. So let's see if that'll work. So by doing this cleanup a lot, I created a little kind of cluster of tools that I found myself creating over and over again, and I saved it as a setting, and I'll show you that right now. I just call this, so I created this myself. This isn't going to be in your tools list, but I'll show you how to create it. I called it patch, and you can see what comes in is just an underlay called patch with a little knot for an input, and then we've got a transform, a merge, and a mask. So here's how I use this. If I just move this into our little chain, I pipe the transform in here, and look at this merge. So this mask that I've created down here is empty. There's nothing created yet. But as soon as I click this, it puts me into the mask creation mode. So all I gotta do now is draw a little mask around this guy, the part that I wanna fix. Kind of drag these out a little bit. And by the way, this is a cool little technique. If you have vertices selected and you hold Option and you click anywhere, you can drag the vertices, which is cool. Sometimes it's just easier to just click wherever as opposed to trying to click the little guys there. So now what I can do is I take this transform and check this out. Now I've got a finger over here, and I can kind of line up where the knuckle is maybe, and it looks like maybe I want to possibly scale it. So if I tab through our tools here, now I've got the anchor point that I can move here, tag back to the transform. Now I can try maybe zooming this up just a little bit, kind of lining this line up a little bit. And if I click my mask again, just click away so that the controls go away so I can actually see what I'm doing. I have here, I can soften this edge pretty crazily so that it blends. And I can still go in and tweak it further, get it lined up whatever I want. And without having to do anything else, that doesn't look too bad. And what's cool is because everything is stabilized, for the most part, it works. Obviously we have some fixing that we need to do, but that's okay. That's why we have this little rig. So it looks like it kind of shifts over a little bit to the right. So if I just take my transform, double click the keyframe right here for center, and then move to where it no longer works. I can maybe try scooting this over. Looks like our knuckle is kind of in the wrong spot here. Looks like we might actually want to soften this mask up a little bit more too. So let's do that. So it's not so bad. There's a spot here that looks a little weird here, and so what's nice now is now we can check ourselves and just see kind of how we're doing. So let's view this merge. let's see what's instance transform. Oh, I see. You can see we're not actually piped from our patch. We got to pipe the output into the instance transform. And then now we're all piped up. So if we view the merge, let's just play it down. See, we're getting a little bit of haze here that we can deal with. But for the most part, we're clean. Not too bad. So let me show you how to deal with this little hazy part, which is just the fact that we've got our mask very soft. So if we view this merge again, which is our patch, our distorted patch, let's just check out where it is. And so it's this part here. So if we just create another mask here, we're just going to use this as a subtraction mask, because we don't want to affect our softness. It works for every other spot for us except right here. So rather than trying to turn the softness down or anything like that, we're just going to cut this off. So that moved up there. Go ahead and take this mask that we just made, shift, pipe it in here, and let's go ahead and just view this result real quick. So we've got this plus this. So if we come over here to subtract, now we're cutting that off. And if we do just a little bit of softness here, just so we don't have any jaggy edges, now you can see right away, if you look at our result over here, and if we on off this mask, we fixed it. So what we might need to do, possibly, I'm going to assume, is animate this a little bit. And I've got my animation turned off by default. If you have yours, if you're a default version of Fusion, it's probably already, this is already going to have a little green tick here, which means that it's ready for animation. I turn that off because I usually just create still masks, and if I'm going to animate them, I specifically know that. So like in this case, I'll double click this to turn this on, but like I said, yours is probably already turned on. So now if we just scroll through a little bit, let's just go ahead and kind of put this mask where it belongs. Just something like this, and we know this is fine here. You can do that. Again, this is just a subtraction mask for the softness, so we're not trying to do any crazy roto. It doesn't have to be too accurate here. Scroll this back, and that looks good. Pretty good. You can see right here the softness, and then it gets a little sharp and then soft. That's because of the sharpness of this subtraction mask. So we can look at this result here and try to dial that in just a little bit better if we want to be a little bit closer. So I'll just do something like that. We're getting a little bit of rounding here from the softness, and it just has to do with the fact that my mask itself is round. If you wanted to make a mask that was a little bit more articulated, you could deal with that, but that's going to be fine. We're obviously zoomed in 300% here. So let me jump out and let's look at this in full screen. I just hit F4 and let's play this down and check it out. And now you can see with pretty minimal effort, we've got not too bad of a cleanup with some pretty crazy out of focus, some pretty crazy depth of field, some perspective, the light's changing, the camera is moving, his hand is moving. If you were trying to do this as a paint cleanup, that could be quite the nightmare, but this is obviously not too bad. And there's more you could do if you needed to go, if you needed to go even cleaner than this, you can come in here and you can do things within our little patch here. Let's say that I needed to distort this even more intensely. Like let's say for this part that I'm seeing here. If I create a grid warp, just pipe this right in here. We'll do selected instead of magnet. That just lets us marquee select here. And we can turn the grid down a little bit. And then let's click away, which, let me turn this off so we can scroll here. Okay, so there's a little shift that's happening there. So that looks fine there. Turn this back on, Again, similar to the mask, if we double click here, now we're armed for animation. And if I go over, I can see where I need to, we can tell from this line that we're a little bit scooted over. So if I grab this, maybe grab these two guys, and we can actually look at our result here. If I click this little icon, this is turning off our view, our little gizmos. And if we move this over, now you can see that we can line this up a little bit better. And again, because we're in a stabilized pre-comp, this isn't going to break all the other work that we've done. So it looks like in this case, this probably didn't help us out too much. Probably made things worse. So it's on a case-by-case basis. I would say that this looked better without the grid warp, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. But that's just to know, that's something that I do quite often when I need to line up things like lines or just anything else that reveals the fact that you've sort of offset patched a little bit. But yeah, that's basically the technique. If I jump to my, if I hit the greater than button to jump to my B buffer here, and I pipe my original plate, and then we go full screen here, and if I A-B this, you can see, if I play this down, you can see it's not too bad. So obviously if this is for a real job, you need to be a little bit cleaner about it along some of these edges, but you know, in not too long, this is a pretty decent cleanup for something that in previous times would be pretty difficult to do. And actually one more thing that I just remembered that I was running into when I was doing this is, as you can see, when I zoom in really close, there's quite a bit of noise here. I can look at the different channels, and what's going to happen, let me hit high quality here. What's going to happen when you stabilize and unstabilize this shot is that you're going to be getting a little bit of softness on this noise. You can see it right here. If I A-B, you can see, hopefully you can see that with the compression here. We're getting just a tiny bit of softness. You might not be able to see that, but I can see it here. And if you're doing something at really high resolution, that may or may not be okay. You may not actually want to be losing that softness, especially when they A-B this shot later. They're going to notice, they're going to say, hey, this is getting a little bit soft. So the way that you can kind of get around that is, it's because this whole patch is being stretched out and then it's being stretched back. So obviously you're losing a little bit of resolution there. It's recalculating these pixels. So what you can do is, if all you're putting is a little patch here, you can actually take a matte control, pipe that in after your patch, take your mask, let's look at this again. This is our mask for our patch. And if we pipe this in holding option so we can see our options, pipe it into the garbage matte, which by default, yours is going to be like this, but I have mine set to invert by default just because this is what it's going to look like for you. It's going to put a hole there. But if you invert the garbage matte, now all you have here is your patch. And if we look at our alpha channel, you can see everything else is clear. So now all we're returning back to the plate is this little patch instead of the whole hand. So now if we look here and we A-B, the only thing getting soft is this little patch. Everything else, if you look really close, we're one-to-one with our noise. And then if this is too soft and you need to add a little bit of grain or something, you know, then you can just do that. You can pipe that in right here and you know, add a little bit of grain to your patch. Just match the grain if you need to. Look at the different color channels and match that grain in, and you've got your result. And so, yeah, This is doing cleanup and fusion. This is stabilized Precomp using Mocha. Mocha, highly recommended. I couldn't do any of my work without it. Yeah, look forward to hearing from you guys and seeing if this is helpful. Thanks a lot.